To win over the guy she'd been crushing on for 3 years, she edited his photo, turning his mouth into a butt. Then she slathered herself in lubricant and squirmed her way inside. Lisa was a sculpture major in art school. She'd been secretly in love with Jack, a guy in the same department. And just like that, 3 whole years slipped by. Over those long 3 years, her feelings for Jack gradually twisted into an obsessive fixation. She was always quietly following him, spying on every little detail of his life. She'd even pick up the toothbrush Jack threw away and take it home to lick it over and over. In her deranged mind, this was their own special form of long-distance intimacy. But sadly, Jack never once gave Lisa a second glance, because the girl Jack had his heart set on was this foreign exchange student with bleached blonde hair named Anna. You gotta say, Jack had some pretty unique taste. To confess his feelings to Anna, he spent 3 whole months hand-carving a nude sculpture of her. On the day of the sculpture exhibition, Jack was full of anticipation, certain he'd win Anna's heart. But when Anna saw that explicit plaster statue and compared it to her own unremarkable self, her expression turned ice cold. She called him a creep and stormed right out, and he never noticed Lisa watching him from the corner, her eyes burning with jealousy. Jack stumbled into the elevator heading home, his mind consumed with how to make Anna happy. He completely ignored the strange announcement from the elevator. Jack kept calling Anna, his eyes glued to his phone screen. He totally missed the woman in the pink dress pressed against the glass outside the elevator. From this moment on, Jack's nightmare officially began. That elevator announcement was a subtle piece of foreshadowing by the director. Crowded didn't mean the space was crowded. It meant something malicious was closing in. Sure enough, while he was taking a shower, he suddenly noticed words appearing on the fogged-up bathroom glass out of nowhere. "I like you." Halfway through dinner, he felt something in his mouth he couldn't chew no matter how hard he tried. He pulled it out for a closer look, and it turned out to be a clump of curly hair. Jack was instantly overcome with disgust. He hunched over the kitchen sink, nearly throwing up his own bile. Right at that moment, a frantic pounding suddenly erupted from outside the door. Jack yelled through the door several times, asking who it was, but there wasn't a single sound from the other side. He forced down the fear rising inside him and reluctantly pressed his eye to the peephole. Jack was so terrified he collapsed to the floor. Before he could even catch his breath, the door handle started turning frantically. Even more horrifying, the deadbolt that he'd clearly locked was slowly being turned open from the outside. Jack lunged at the handle like a madman, holding it in place, locked in a standoff with whatever was on the other side of that door. Then suddenly, all the noise vanished at once. He gathered his courage and peered through the peephole again. The hallway was completely empty, as if nothing had happened at all. Here's my bold guess. The one causing trouble outside the door was most likely Lisa. She was deliberately testing Jack over and over, getting a thrill from toying with his emotions. By creating fear, she was satisfying her own twisted sense of possession. Just then, Jack got a call from Anna. She said she actually really liked the sculpture. She'd only run away because there were too many people and she was too embarrassed. She asked Jack to go to the amusement park together that weekend. After hanging up, Jack tossed and turned with excitement for a long time. He completely failed to notice the ghastly pale hand reaching out from under his bed. The weekend arrived in no time. The two of them had an absolute blast at the amusement park, but Jack kept feeling a chill down his spine, like someone was constantly watching him. Yet every time he turned around, there was nothing there. As they were about to leave, Anna said she wanted to go see that sculpture one more time. But the moment they arrived at the exhibition hall, they were both stunned. The sculpture Jack had poured countless sleepless nights into was smashed to pieces all over the floor. Just then, the hallway lights started flickering on and off. A figure in pink was pressed against the corner of the wall, secretly watching Jack. Jack was dead certain she was the one who smashed his sculpture. Fuming with rage, he chased after her, but he had no idea that the person who actually destroyed the sculpture was long gone. What he was chasing was something far more terrifying. The moment he charged into the pitch-black hallway, Jack was frozen in his tracks by an eerie, sinister laugh. Then a pair of ice-cold hands suddenly clamped around him from behind. Jack was scared half to death. He frantically rushed into a classroom to hide, but that terrifying figure was following his trail, closing in step by step. Jack crouched in the corner clutching a sharp utility knife, not even daring to breathe. He had no idea how long he'd been crouching there when the footsteps around him finally faded away. He cautiously peeked out, thinking the terrifying woman had left, but just as he let out a sigh of relief, a sharp sound suddenly came from right above his head. Jack screamed in sheer terror, but the woman had no intention of letting him go. She yanked Jack straight up into the air. Then she leaned close to his ear and whispered, I like you. Staring at the woman's grotesque face, Jack was drenched in cold sweat. He screamed at her to get away. But if you dared to reject this woman, there was only one outcome: death. By the time Anna rushed over, Jack was already a cold, lifeless corpse, and his eyes had been gouged out. A few days later, Jack's funeral was held as scheduled. Anna wept in utter grief. Beside her, Lisa stared at Jack's memorial photo and silently vowed to avenge the man she loved. The truth was, when the woman in pink killed Jack, Lisa had been hiding in the shadows the entire time, witnessing everything with her own eyes. She was already a deranged stalker, so it was perfectly normal for her to be there. The words that suddenly appeared on the bathroom glass, the hair that mysteriously showed up in his food, the ghastly pale hand under the bed, all those strange incidents that kept happening one after another, none of them were the work of the ghost in pink. They were all done by the obsessive, unhinged Lisa. This woman's level of depravity was beyond imagination. She'd been stalking Jack since high school. Even more disturbing, she had a key to Jack's apartment. She'd regularly sneak in while he was out, lie on the bed he'd slept in, and breathe in the scent he left behind. The confession on the bathroom glass wasn't written by hand. She'd licked it on, letter by letter, with her tongue. The ghastly pale hand under the bed? That was Lisa too. She just wanted to listen to Jack's breathing and sleep beside him. This kind of love, twisted to the absolute extreme, just thinking about it is enough to make your skin crawl. To avenge Jack, Lisa threw herself into the school library. Day and night, she dug through old newspapers and dusty archives. She discovered that the eerie woman in pink was known locally as the Woe Woman. Years ago, a high school sophomore named Takuya had been killed. His death looked exactly like Jack's. The only difference was that a stalk of rice had been forcefully shoved into Takuya's mouth. The first person to discover Takuya's body was a man named Inuyama, who now worked as a waiter at a cafe. Following this lead, Lisa quickly tracked down Inuyama. After Lisa explained why she was there, Inuyama slowly began recounting a story buried by time. He told her that the Woe Woman was actually Sayuri. Sayuri was the most invisible girl in class, an overweight girl who'd been secretly crushing on Takuya, the most handsome boy in school. Takuya was a star on the field, a big man on campus, adored by all the girls. Sayuri was too insecure and timid to ever confess to Takuya's face. All she could do was pour her feelings into love letters and secretly slip them into Takuya's shoe locker. But she never expected that one of those letters would be found by a classmate.
阿久津拓也くんへいつも見ています。拓也くんの彼女になるのが夢です。好き大好きです。
The boys in class mocked and humiliated her relentlessly. They forced Sayuri to face reality, telling her that only if she lost weight and got plastic surgery would she ever be worthy of someone like Takuya. Sayuri hung her head low, not daring to say a single word back. Just when she wished the ground would swallow her whole, Takuya walked into the noisy classroom. He gently comforted Sayuri, telling her she didn't need to change who she was. Sayuri's eyes instantly welled up with tears. She looked up at Takuya, full of hope, but the very next second, Takuya dropped every trace of warmth. He looked at her coldly and said, "Why don't you just go die?" Then, right in front of her face, he ripped the love letter to shreds. One humiliation after another completely shattered Sayuri's self-worth. Driven to the depths of despair, she ultimately lost her life, but her death meant nothing to anyone. Instead, it became a joke people tossed around in casual conversation. Then, a week later, Takuya suddenly lost his mind. He kept begging for mercy, pleading with thin air. Finally, he ran screaming out of the classroom. By the time everyone found him, he was already dead in the rice paddy. A stalk of rice had been stuffed into his mouth. After hearing Inuyama's story, Lisa felt something didn't add up. Sayuri's hatred should have been directed only at Takuya. Why would Jack, who had absolutely nothing to do with him, also end up dead? To get to the bottom of this, she went back to the library. Before long, she uncovered another bizarre case. The subject of this case was a man named Issei, a total scumbag with a chaotic love life. The report detailed the entire incident. Issei and his girlfriend Savi were living together in a shared apartment. 5 people lived there in total, 3 men and 2 women. Behind Savi's back, Issei had already sweet-talked the other 2 girls into his arms, but his actual girlfriend Savi had no idea. One day, the group gathered in the living room to watch a horror movie together. The girl next to him kept screaming in fright. Issei casually stroked the hair of Savi beside him, muttering that the movie wasn't scary at all. But when he looked down, he realized Savi had already passed out drunk on the floor. So whose hair had he just been stroking? He turned around. All that was left in his palm was a tangled clump of hair. There was no one beside him at all. Issei went weak with fear. He wanted to rush to the bathroom, use the toilet, and calm himself down. But the moment he reached the staircase, an unidentified drop of liquid landed on his head. Issei was scared out of his mind. He dove into the kitchen to hide, but the woe woman had no intention of letting him go. Like a clingy maggot, she slowly squirmed her way over to Sanae. Sanae shoved the woman away with everything he had and frantically ran to the living room to beg his roommates for help. But the atmosphere in the room was deeply unsettling. It turned out Sabi had known about Sanae's cheating all along. Sanae broke down sobbing, desperately crying for help, but everyone there just watched with cold, indifferent eyes. Not a single person lifted a finger to help him. That night, the woe woman clung to Sanae the entire time. He barely survived, but the ordeal left him completely mentally shattered. All he could do anymore was sit there with a blank, vacant grin. The second case was even more disturbing. It started as an ordinary family of 3. The husband had violent tendencies. He was a deadbeat who spent his days either drinking and causing trouble or beating his wife and child. But recently, he kept saying he could see a woman in a long pink dress following him. His temper was getting worse and worse. His wife Reiko was at her wit's end. She had no choice but to bring in his spiritual master to exorcise the evil. After examining the energy in the house, the master said outright that her husband had been latched onto by the woe woman. The master left behind a bottle of sacred Tamajin sake and instructed him to place it by his bedside every night. If he kept it up for 7 days, it would suppress the evil spirit. But the husband didn't believe in any of that. He thought the master was just a con artist and kept complaining that his wife was wasting money. To calm her volatile husband down, Reiko prepared a huge spread of dishes the next day. But just because she forgot to hand him a hot towel over something that trivial, the husband flew into a rage on the spot. He flipped the entire table over and ordered her to cook everything again. Reiko, terrified of being hit, could only keep her head down and apologize over and over. You could tell this was far from the first time. That night, while the husband was sleeping, he suddenly felt someone tugging at his blanket. He snapped his eyes open and looked. What was covering him wasn't a blanket at all. It was the woe woman's long pink dress. He frantically reached for the Tamajin sake, but when he grabbed the bottle, it was completely empty. That's when his wife flashed an eerie smile. She had already poured out the exorcism sake long ago. After more than a decade of domestic abuse, she'd had more than enough. She wanted to use the woe woman's hands to get rid of her worthless husband. The husband was scared out of his wits and scrambled out of the bedroom to escape. Right at that moment, Lisa burst in carrying a pressure cooker. She was planning to use her homemade pressure cooker bomb to blow the woe woman to pieces and avenge her beloved Jack. But wouldn't you know it, at the critical moment, the bomb's remote control malfunctioned. The woe woman backhanded Lisa and sent her flying several meters. The husband used that opening to bolt. He hid beside the wardrobe, not daring to breathe. After the husband's death, Reiko thought it was finally over. But who could have imagined that the woe woman would latch onto her 5-year-old son, Yo-Yo? Yo-Yo started waving and saying hello to thin air every day. He even drew a picture of the woe woman in his notebook, constantly calling out, "Big sister, come play with me." Terrified for her son, Reiko called in the exorcist again. The exorcist made quite an entrance, chanting spells, banging gongs and drums, putting on a whole elaborate show. But who could have predicted that after all that commotion, not only did it fail to drive the spirit away, it actually summoned the woe woman.
終わったんですか?
The woe woman's power was truly terrifying. The moment the master uttered her name, his head flew clean off his neck. Reiko had no time to be afraid. Following the name the exorcist had spoken before dying, she actually managed to find Sayuri's home. The door was opened by an older woman, presumably Sayuri's mother. Reiko quickly made up a story, saying she used to be Sayuri's classmate and wanted to come in and light some incense in her memory. But before she could even finish, a heavy-set girl walked out from inside the house. It was Sayuri herself. It turned out that when Sayuri jumped from the building all those years ago, she happened to land in the bushes below and survived. She'd only broken her legs. After that, she stayed home to recover and never went back to school. Her classmates spread rumors among themselves. The stories got more and more exaggerated. Eventually, the rumor became that she died from the fall and turned into the murderous woe woman. Sayuri told Reiko that after Takuya publicly humiliated her, she heard about a special tree on the mountain behind the school called the Severance Tree. People said that if you wrote your enemy's name on a slip of paper and nailed it to the tree with a sickle, it would sever the bond completely. After she nailed the paper to the tree, the hatred in her heart truly vanished. It was as if the tree had absorbed it all. But she never imagined that just a few days later, Takuya would suddenly drop dead. After that, More and more villagers started copying what she did. They wrote down all the resentment and grievances they'd been bottling up on yellowed slips of paper and nailed them into that cursed tree on the mountain. As the days went by, the entire tree, from its roots to its very top, was completely covered with sickles and paper slips. After hearing this horrifying story, Reiko immediately ran toward the tree on the mountain. When she saw it with her own eyes, she froze on the spot. The tree before her was covered absolutely packed with rusted sickles. It radiated an indescribable, bone-chilling eeriness. After searching through them, she finally found the slip with her son's name on it. Just as she reached out to pull the sickle free, Lisa had quietly snuck into Reiko's home and taken Yo-Yo, who'd been playing by himself. Her plan was to use Yo-Yo as bait to lure the Woe woman out of hiding. She set up a death trap in her workshop, scattering crackers all over the floor. The moment the Woe woman's feet touched those crackers, her position would be instantly revealed. The humidifier was filled with the sacred Tamajin sake, specifically designed to suppress the Woe woman's dark power. Before long, a faint sound came from the doorway. The crackers on the floor were crushed to pieces. Lisa immediately hit the switch on the humidifier. The mist of Tamajin sake instantly filled the entire room. But at the critical moment, the pressure cooker bomb malfunctioned yet again. Furious, Lisa grabbed the entire jug of Tamajin sake and hurled it straight at the Woe woman. Drenched by the sake, the Woe woman was forced to reveal her true form. She was soaking wet from head to toe, squirming on the ground like a bloated caterpillar, muttering "I like you" over and over as she inched toward the little boy.
僕も大好きだよ。
Those words made the Woe woman freeze on the spot. Her face was filled with utter disbelief. In all the years she'd existed, this was the very first time anyone had ever said they liked her. Right at that critical moment, Reiko finally pulled the sickle from the slit bearing Yo-Yo's name. The instant the curse fully dissolved, the Woe woman collapsed to the ground like a deflated balloon, shriveling into a dried-out husk of human skin. Lisa followed that piece of skin as it flew all the way to the base of the tree on the mountain. There, she spotted a familiar figure, holding a sickle and nailing a fresh slip of paper to the tree. To her shock, it was Inuyama. Inuyama had been the one behind all of this tragedy from the very beginning. Back in school, Inuyama was extremely timid. He'd been bullied and tormented by Takuya for years. One day, while he was hiding in a corner crying, he happened to see Sayuri nailing a slip of paper to the tree. A few days later, Takuya mysteriously died. That's when it clicked for Inuyama. This tree had a terrifying power of cursing. As long as you nailed your enemy's name to it, that person would be brutally killed by the Woe woman. From that point on, he began using this tree to take revenge on everyone who had ever bullied him. Watching them die one by one, his heart grew darker and darker. Whenever he saw a happy couple, he'd nail the boyfriend's name to the tree. That's exactly how Jack died. Even a 5-year-old boy, just because he was close with a little girl, ended up on Inuyama's hit list. When Lisa finally learned the whole truth, an icy fury surged behind her eyes. She raised the modified pressure cooker bomb and slammed it into the tree with everything she had. With an ear-splitting explosion, the entire tree was blown to smithereens. Rusted sickles flew in every direction. The eyeballs that had been harvested over the years came rolling out from deep within the trunk. Inuyama, standing right beside the tree, was pierced all over by the flying sickles. The sharp blades he'd spent decades nailing into that tree all came back for him in the end. And that's where the story ends. A lot of people probably assumed by the end that Lisa was a devoted lover seeking righteous vengeance, but peel back the layers of her sick obsession, and you'll understand. She was never some righteous avenger. What she truly resented wasn't that the Woe woman had killed Jack. It was why did this twisted, evil creature get to steal the man she'd been obsessing over for 3 whole years? Jack never belonged to her, but in Lisa's warped sense of possession, Jack was her private prey. The Woe woman was merely an intruder who'd stolen what was hers. Her so-called revenge was nothing more than a hysterical meltdown, the fallout of an unrequited love that went nowhere and a possessive delusion that finally collapsed. Alright, that's it for today's story. I'm Jack. See you next time.